I think I want to start with what I learned over in Europe that takes us down the road of understanding of dark future even more. ESG is really, truly just the beginning. I went over to Scotland and London for the last 2 weeks. Spent a week in Scotland. Met with a wonderful couple of scholars over there I'll talk about later. And really began to understand, how far Scotland has already gone. Scotland is, that's Braveheart Freedom. Nobody's screaming freedom over there. They are already implementing 15-minute cities. 15-minute cities are cities that are... It is so bizarre. Are cities where you walk, where you don't drive. Everything that you want is within 15 minutes because the car is going to be eliminated. And I know that's hard to believe, but it is true. And I'll lay this case out for you as the show goes on. But we are headed toward a zero carbon world. That's what they're pushing. That will mean the end of almost everything as you know it. They're implementing these 15-minute cities. Already, they're on the path to eliminate the airports. There will only be 2 airports in Great Britain. One in Heathrow, that's London, and the other one, I think, in Glasgow, up in Scotland. That's it. Everything else, you're going to have to take a train for, and it'll have to be an electric train. Your cars and moving from city to city is going away. This is so evident when you come over to England or Scotland. You see it already in play. The cars, the taxi cabs are all being replaced by electrics, and the cabbies hate it. Hate it. First of all, we were over there and it was 80 degrees. There is no air conditioning to speak of in England or Scotland. None. Now, normally they have cooler temperatures, but it's the exact same as it is in Seattle. It reminded me so much of growing up in Seattle. It's the same weather, and in the summer, you'll have really hot days, and that's why people have air conditioning in their cars and their homes in Seattle. Many days, you can just open up the windows because it gets cool at night. Same thing with London, but it's 80 or 90, and last summer or summer before, it was up at 100. When you're in a city baking at 100, when you're at a theater or a restaurant, you're seeing a show, and there are 1,000 people sitting on top of each other in one room, it gets really hot, really fast. No air conditioning. And that's not just because they can't retrofit the buildings. It's because air conditioning is a thing of the past. And when you say you can't retrofit the buildings, it was very interesting because I went to Windsor Castle. That's the home where Charles and the Queen used to live. It was the only place that felt like America. It had plenty of air conditioning. You know how in some cities, especially New York, you're walking down on a really hot day. These stores will actually open their doors. So when you're walking by on the sidewalk, you feel this push of cold air. It makes you want to go into the store and get cool. That's how they attract people. No, not in England. They don't do that, except at the Palace of the King. Who, by the way, I believe it was him or, maybe one of his staff or sons, or I don't know who it was, but the royal helicopter landed at Windsor Castle. And I thought, that's interesting. You would think that helicopters would be a thing of the past, as would air conditioning, if you truly cared about the climate. By the way, I learned this too. I don't pay attention to England. You know what the Magna Carta is. Pat's here. You know the Magna Carta. What was that, Pat?
What was that?
Yeah.
It's like the forerunner to our Constitution.
Right. It was the first document for the rights of man. Okay. Did you know that King Charles has introduced something new called the Terra Carta?
No.
Yeah. I didn't know that
heard
either. Yeah. The Terra Carta. What is...
Really?
That's Latin. Terra is Latin for earth. Earth. This is the rights of the earth charter. Okay? And they usurp the rights of man. So they say it goes hand in hand with the Magna Carta, but it doesn't. The earth has rights that cancel out some of man's rights. This is how far this is going. By the way, the White House has just approved and supports the new proposal, as do all of the key players in the UN. They are already acting as if this is a done deal, but the United Nations has released now, and everyone seems to be on board, and it's coming at us like a freight train. Our common agenda. Our common agenda. Now, can I ask, have you voted for anybody at the UN? Because I have never voted for anybody at the UN. They've never called me up and said, hey, we're the UN. We're doing a survey. We're coming up with a common agenda. What do you think? What should be on our agenda? Because I think in America, they might have found a lot of them would have said to get rid of the United Nations. But their common agenda is an expansion, and a major expansion, of Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. Its foundation is essentially the Great Reset, but with several massive additions, including a plan to give the United Nations sweeping emergency powers. This is the Great Reset on steroids. I love the emergency powers. The emergency platform would give the United Nations the ability to actively promote and drive an international response that places the principles of equity and solidarity at the center of its work. The UN, along with its stakeholders of the world, including academics, governments, private sector actors, meaning global corporations, and international finance institutions, will be there to ensure that there is a unified global response to whatever that crisis might be. Now it's weird because I went to the London School of Economics, which a lot of people will associate with Hayek. The London School of Economics should be associated with George Soros. Okay, I've got some pictures I'm going to show you. Probably on television this week, but I learned a lot. And I went to the bookstore and I just picked up a couple of books. These were all in the same section. It seems to be a series. One was Hurricane Season. One was just called Emergency. And my favorite is Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. It's one of my favorite. So I had some reading to do in front of me. They seem to be preparing for an emergency of some sort. Now, they also, in this, have a digital compact, a global digital compact. Part of our common agenda proposal calls for massive public collection, use of data, and global regulations. It also calls for a robust accountability criteria and standards for digital platform and users to address disinformation, hate speech, and other harmful online content. End quote. So in other words, the UN is taking a role of governing speech online, including social media. Now, there's a ton I could tell you about this, but this is what we talk about in the book Dark Future. Sustainable and equitable rules for technology. Now, we're telling you about the World Economic Forum. I'm telling you today, there is more information out now from the United Nations that backs all of it up. The one thing I learned so much. I learned so much. One thing I learned is the English are very concerned about the United States. I had somebody behind the counter. I was talking to him, and he said, "Where are you from in the States?" I said, "We're from Texas." And he said, "How are things?" And I said, "In the United States?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Not as bad as you might think in some places, worse than you would think in others." And he said, "We watch the news over here closely." Another couple of guys gathered behind the counter, and they were all like looking at me and listening to him and nodding their heads. He said, "We're very concerned about the future of America." And I said, "Well, you should be, but you should also be concerned for your future as well, because we're all connected now." And I paid the bill. And as I walked out, he looked at me, and it was so heartfelt. It was so odd. He looked at me and he said, "Hey, please be careful over there." They're very concerned